and welcome. My name is Rich, and this is my second attempt at the Yet Another Wrestling Channel podcast. This is going to be available on both Spotify and YouTube, and this is just a quick note before I start to say I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe on whichever you're listening on. I'd very much appreciate that. The thing that differentiates this podcast is I try to talk about longer subjects, and I try to put a bit more opinion in, more than I normally would in my YouTube videos. Today I want to talk about celebrities in wrestling. These past few years have seen quite a lot of changes, and I wanted to kind of highlight just where we've come from and where it might go from now, and maybe pose a bit of a theory at the end. So celebrity involvement with wrestling has had a very dubious history, to say the least. Many credit the success of WrestleMania 1 with the involvement of Cyndi Lauper and her friendship with Captain Lou Albano, along with Liberace and Muhammad Ali and more. From there we get to Mr. T getting in the ring at WrestleMania 1 and 2 and not trusting Rowdy Roddy Piper to do business as planned. Now fast forward 25 years, and Mickey Rourke would have had a much better WrestleMania moment had he trusted Chris Jericho. Now what happened there is, according to Jericho, he did a joint interview on Larry King Live with Rourke ahead of WrestleMania, where he was talking trash to Rourke, and he was doing it completely in character. Jericho was trying to sell the WrestleMania match or the moment or whatever was supposed to happen. Now, Mickey Rourke, who actually trained in the ring for his role in The Wrestler, which is a movie I keep threatening to cover on my channel, so that might come someday. But he clearly couldn't tell when a wrestler was working with him, as this caused Rourke to feel threatened. When we got to WrestleMania, Mickey apparently arrived with Frank Shamrock, a brother of Ken for any Attitude Era fans, to be his backup in case Jericho tried anything. To me, mostly because of my love of that film, The Wrestler, Mickey Rourke is the kind of one that got away, in terms of celebrities, having matches at least. I would have really wanted to see Mickey Rourke actually have a match. I mean, he does, like I said, he trained to wrestle for the film. He trained with Afa, the Wild Samoan, and he had several matches in front of live crowds. I don't know how many of them were shot like a movie in terms of cuts and takes and whatever, but he did wrestle in front of crowds in the movie, and I would have loved to have seen him do an actual live match, especially at WrestleMania. But the silver lining, though, is that we got to see Ricky Steamboat. We got two really stellar performances out of him, coming out of retirement to face Jericho, first at WrestleMania and then again at Backlash. So even though things went a bit wrong there, and I think Mickey Rourke apparently realised after the fact, how he should have dealt with it, but or at least there was one good thing to come out of it, and that was the Ricky Steamboat matches. I mean, the ones that got away are such an interesting thought to me. For many years, Shaquille O'Neal was one of those, specifically in a match against The Big Show that was rumoured on and off for many years. Eventually, they had a brief moment when Shaq entered the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania 32, but it wouldn't be until March 2021 that he would have an actual match, in AEW of all places. I think it's fair to say that when the Cody and Red Velvet against Shaq and Jade Cargill match was announced, most of us had pretty low expectations from all the pretty poor celebrity matches that had preceded it. O'Neal himself didn't exactly help this by barely bothering to promote the match in any way. I think he mentioned it on TV a few times. I mean, the whole point of bringing a famous face in and having them wrestle on your show is to have them promote it and have them be a draw, after all. To be fair though, I haven't seen it since it happened, but I remember really enjoying that match. However, the pedant in me still wants to know what they were thinking with that empty ambulance bit at the end, where Shaquille was in an ambulance and then when they opened the doors he was gone. I mean, I still don't know what we were supposed to think was going on there. So from here I'm going to pose you a question. Is there a celebrity, an athlete, or someone who could have had a match or even made an appearance that didn't? I'll give you another example from WrestleMania 19. I kinda wish some famous rapper had stepped up to John Cena. I doubt anyone like Eminem would have shown up to answer the challenge that Cena put out, but anyone answering the call would have been preferable to the promo Cena ended up cutting to cardboard cutouts on the stage. If you have an idea like that, something that could have happened but didn't, a celebrity that could have got involved, it was rumoured maybe, let me know in the comments. Now this past week, at the time I'm recording this, Bad Bunny, a man who I admittedly know nothing about beyond his WWE appearances, put on, I guess what you could call a show-stealing performance in his match with Damian Priest. Of course, a big part of that is the slew of people who ran in, and it was really cool to see, especially Carlito and Savio Vega. And of course Damian too, but Bad Bunny definitely held up his end. I mean, he's not the only celebrity to turn heads this year either, as Logan Paul's impressed far beyond what anyone really expected of him. I mean, he even went as far as to main event a pay-per-view with Roman Reigns last year. Now let's go on further. Pat McAfee and Johnny Knoxville, they've both put on really great performances in recent years. If it hadn't have been for the pure nostalgia of seeing Stone Cold Steve Austin having one more match, my absolute highlight of WrestleMania last year would probably have been the Johnny Knoxville match against Sami Zayn. And I only noticed this when I was writing this, but isn't it interesting that two of the biggest moments from last year's WrestleMania involved Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and this year they were in the main event together? And the lowest point for me, I guess, would be the Raw guest host era. And I thought about covering it in detail a while back, and so I looked up all the different guest hosts, and there were way more than I thought, although there is the possibility that I just repressed a lot of it. There were 105 individual guest hosts from June 2009 to April 2016, which is way longer than I thought those lasted. Plus the Muppets, who I'm counting as one act in that. So 106 technically. But that's over 7 years. And of that 106, 13 were injured or retired wrestlers, leaving 94 celebrities. Many would just take part in talking segments, and some would wrestle. But you could absolutely tell who couldn't care less to be there. Now, off the top of my head, the ones that I remember being really good were Jesse Ventura, Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne, and the Muppet one. And maybe Hugh Jackman as well when he decked Dolph Ziggler. Contenders for the worst, let's not get into that right now. Although one that I'd totally forgotten about was the Grumpy Cat. Now, there's a ton of evidence for WWE being stuck in the past, but never forget that they once had their flagship show hosted by a meme. And since I've had a go at WWE, I'll point out a naff AEW cameo too. When Miro arrived in the company and had that strange video gamer gimmick or whatever that was supposed to be, on the 30th of September 2020 episode of Dynamite, in a pre-taped segment, Miro was planning a bachelor party for Kip Sabian, and he would be joined for a game of Pac-Man by Billy Mitchell. Now I have no idea how well known he is in America, and because I had no clue who he was, and I had to have it explained to me by fans on Twitter. But knowing who he is now and why he's famous or infamous, it felt like an even odder choice on a few levels. So Billy is famous for appearing in the documentary King of Kong, and he claims to be the greatest Donkey Kong player ever. He's really controversial though, as many claim that he's actually just a cheater. And he's been very litigious towards those who accuse him. That's more how I know him these days. So why you'd have him appear in a random segment on a pro wrestling show, but then his presence was a surprise, so it wasn't built to. It was leading to nothing going forward, and he wasn't even mentioned by name. So that just makes it even weirder to me. Now at the start of this I used the word dubious, not to be relied upon, to describe the history of famous personalities getting in the ring. Now for every spectacular moment like Logan Paul launching himself through the air, there's a Jeremy Piven repeatedly saying Summerfest instead of SummerSlam. For every Bad Bunny, there's a Kevin Federline, in music and in the ring. The bar for celebrity involvement in wrestling feels really high right now. But for so many years it's been at rock bottom. And there are tons of examples that I haven't even hinted at. Now I can only speculate on this, but I wonder how much of the success of the names I mentioned earlier are due to them being aware of the stigma caused by poor performances in the past. How much of it involved wanting to prove fans wrong for doubting them. I'm not aware of Logan Paul ever expressing that he was a fan before joining WWE, but I've heard Bad Bunny was, and Pat McAfee clearly knows his stuff too. Maybe we suffered through all those guest hosts to get to performances we see these days. Or maybe I'm just thinking too much, and booking celebrities is kinda like a box of chocolates. And I'll let you finish that quote. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave me a comment. Please consider liking if you enjoyed this, or even subscribing. My name's Rich. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for watching or listening to yet another wrestling channel.